T-minus 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hey folks, welcome to the Launch Sequence Podcast. Got another episode for you where we're going to be talking about Star Citizen, and it's quite the week to be talking Star Citizen. We got a fresh quote-unquote delay to 4.0. We've got the first progress tracker update of the year, and we've got some movement here and there on what's been going on with Star Citizen progress overall. So I got fellow roadmap watcher CasaBlack with me. You've been on the show a couple times, and generally we like to talk about the roadmap itself and what's going on with it. And today we're going to kind of cut to the center of the topic and really, can people rely on the roadmap? What is it telling us about the near future and 1.0 and 4.0 overall? So before we get into questions, I guess this is a question. Before we get into my prepared questions, I'd like to ask her what's your feeling about Star Citizen right now?
I mean, it's been a slow year. I mean, I've been having discussions, Discord, info runners, Twitter, and mainly my whole feeling is this year has been a evolutionary year versus a revolutionary year. Of course, there's nowhere near as much content, things to actually do. It's been about, your upgrades to all the different systems that we've had. And, I think to everyone's surprise, probably even CIG, some of these things are just taking a lot longer to get there than they wanted to. So it's been a slow year. People putting out videos saying that it's a slow year, maybe even the worst year for Star Citizen, as far as content goes. I could agree with that, but we do know what's coming is very huge and will be a lot of content. So it's just a matter of getting there.
Yeah, I would not say it's the worst year. I think it's definitely not been going as well as we had hoped, especially. Even with the lead up to 323, a lot of the Squadron 42 features that were supposed to come over, and some of them did. Many of them, not as polished as we might hope, especially with the way they've been messaging on those. But I do think that if we see a 4.0 this year, and that's really the big topic of today's show, I still see this being one of the biggest years for this game. And that just comes from, mapping systems, interaction systems, cargo systems, and then obviously server meshing, I think, being really big parts of the foundational part of the game and the way that they're starting to structure their missions. But we'll get all into that. It clearly has been less positive of a year than we had hoped, which I think is what I'm saying around this time, just about every year at this point.
Yeah.
But a lot of that comes down to the communication and expectations that CIG sets. As with every year, that's really what it comes down to. It's not so much players expecting things to just magically get better. It's more so what CIG says at the end of the previous year, at the beginning of that year, that leads to around 8 to 9 to even 10 months into the year. Suddenly you're like, okay, well, where are the improvements you guys talked about? And today, like I said, our topic is really looking at those expectations being set and coming to terms with whether or not we should just stop listening to that kind of messaging, or if there are other ways that we can kind of temper our own expectations, monthly reports, Inside Star Citizen, things like that.
Yeah.
So
I think what I've seen is that we all kind of hit, especially this point of the year, because we all know this is the slow part of the year. And so news is pretty slow, although just dropping at this time kind of, I guess, boosts that a little bit. But we're seeing like this, it's kind of like a cycle. This part of the year, we're seeing things slow down. We're not getting news. And then leading into CitizenCon, we're all kind of like pessimistic and we're all like, we need to stop believing in this. And then we get hit with CitizenCon and they show off this, and that. And they say, oh, this is what we're going to see. And then you're going to see this coming in the next 12 months. These are how many ships. These are the ship previews you're going to see for the next 12 months. And so people, again, get that hype right back up. I mean, we kind of do it to ourselves because we take what they say for, like as gospel. And so I think it's just us setting ourselves up. And I mean, it is definitely them and their marketing and what they're doing at CitizenCon, getting the hype up. It's just us believing that they're actually believing them and what they say, and I think honestly, they it's what they want to try to do. I mean, even with just getting 323 out, I think it came later than what they wanted or expected to. And, it's that whole thing of taking something from a single player game to something with servers and, a live universe. And so I think they just miscalculated, and they miscalculate a lot. They've been doing it for years.
Yeah.
So I think it's just a matter of us tempering what we see at CitizenCon and not falling for the hype.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is to say, over the years, they've, believe it or not, folks, if you're newer to the project, they have gotten better, actually, at setting expectations at CitizenCon. It used to be they would show you stuff that would take 2-3 years, maybe even not even make it into the game. I know CitizenCon 2019, we're still waiting for some form of mission that would take you to a local location from a city to run, like they did with the whole hacking mission in that demo, or even NPCs flying the ships in atmosphere with you as a passenger. That kind of stuff never has shown up. We know it's still in the plans, but it just it's so far down on their list of priorities that we never got to experience it. And over time, they've definitely gotten, I think the last 2 Citizen Cons, they've gotten better at showing us stuff that actually shows up in the next year. But even now, as we're seeing, like you mentioned, they had their next 12-month statement, and we're almost 12 months up, and they're still, I think, maybe 40 to 50% through those features. Now, I kind of took that as the 12 months ending in December, and maybe they should have specified that better. But yeah. I do think that there's a big possibility we'll see a lot of that stuff still get delivered by December, as opposed to 12 months from CitizenCon, which would be in October.
Right.
But let's step back from that and actually forget about 4.0 for a second. I know, hard to do. We're going to jump forward in time and talk about Star Citizen 1.0. I know everybody's grabbing their faces like, what? Why are we going to do this? But let's talk about why that's even a topic right now. Why do you think that we're even discussing Star Citizen 1.0? And that would be the commercial release for anybody who's not keeping track of numbers.
So, of course, when it was announced earlier this year, I didn't gauge the community with this because I don't really participate in Spectrum. Twitter is where I mainly go. I only go to Reddit for when I want to see things like people just trying to figure out what Jared mouthed in the last ISC, things like that. So I didn't really get it. I mean, on my Discord, I'll get a little bit of, people, but not really, many people weren't really talking about 1.0 in my Discord. And ultimately for 1.0, I think it just came down to Richard Tyrer coming in and saying, okay, because he became the overall project lead for
Director.
both games, I guess. Director.
Yeah.
Coming in, of course, I think he's very well organized. And so I think he was like, okay, maybe it didn't come, maybe it was from Chris, but ultimately they're like, what is a 1.0 release going to look like? Because, we're getting Squadron, it's feature complete. What is feature complete for, or at least a 1.0 version for Star Citizen? So I think it was a good time for them to start doing it. Maybe they probably should have not mentioned it to us until CitizenCon is honestly what I think, because I think it was kind of a distraction. Because then, we started seeing, everybody's throwing out what they think 1.0 should be. So now it's coming around to we finally get this first roadmap update. And 1.0, although you kind of have some things hinted at like base building and crafting, we know those are things that they want for 1.0. But at the same time, they're showing that they're working on those now. And we're not really seeing what else is a 1.0 because, we're still just guessing here. We don't know. I mean, of course, I've seen people say we should have 5 systems. Well, if they're talking about 1.0 now and we're not really seeing things in there for 5 systems on the roadmap, are they lowering what 1.0 is for us? I'm just curious what 1.0 is going to be. So them talking about it now, it just seemed too early. I mean, it definitely seemed like more of a CitizenCon thing where they can give more context as to what it should be.
I agree with you there. Before when they talked about it, and I feel like it's kind of threading the needle because I saw 1.0 as the kind of almost like the 4.0 announcement we got way back when. Really, I guess the server meshing announcement, I'll say. The road to release they did with 2018 was kind of, I think it was they got 3.0 out and they finally had a better understanding of their long-term sort of goals. So before 3.0, the project was very scattered. Things were going in different directions and stuff. And when they hit 3.0, they finally got their quarterly updates down. It felt like they had more of an idea of what the long term they wanted to do. There was still, it still was kind of all over the place, I would say, until just a few years ago. But that was when it felt like they set up something that was more structured long term. And now that they're coming up on server meshing with 4.0, it feels like they need to do that again. And I'm guessing that's what they also feel. We need to set something up as, the goal, where we're headed from here, something that people can always reference as the sort of direction that we're headed. And the letter from the chairman came out at a time when I guess they probably expected 4.0 to come out. Wait, what was it? It was actually was it a funding goal that they released the letter from the chairman for this year? I don't actually remember.
Sure.
I don't remember what it was that triggered that, but it felt like they wouldn't have time to release another one until like the end of this year or next year.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking, oh, well, they want to have this long-term goal out. And if they were to release 4.0 by September or October, that was the last letter from the chairman they would have to reference that long-term goal until after 4.0. And after 4.0, you don't have, you need to put something out there by that point. But you do make a good point. And it probably would have been a good idea to just save it until CitizenCon and to make that point and kind of re-announce this long-term effort at that point instead of doing it in a letter from the chairman or something. Because now 1.0 is constantly getting thrown around, and it doesn't have any tangibility. Like you said, we didn't even get the progress tracker update that's supposed to sort of make us privy to what that includes.
Right. Yeah. So I can't remember. Was it Chris that mentioned it in the letter? Or was it actually Richard? Rich Howard that did it.
Chris wrote it, and then Richard had a part in there.
I thought it was Chris that actually mentioned 1.0. Again, it was like one of those things where sometimes he just doesn't need to say anything about something. Like, because I'm pretty sure it was him that said it, and I was just like, I mean, it got you excited for what a 1.0 is as a fan, but at the same time, there's been nothing to come back. And they did bring the roadmap out sooner, closer to May, I believe. There was like March or April. They were saying, no, we're working out some things, and we're going to try to get you something about 1.0 out. And they never did. They keep saying system issues. And the funny thing about this is when this roadmap came out, it doesn't really seem that much different. Like, I don't understand. I know they switched teams around. That was the big major thing. But I just don't see why they postponed it. But I think I'm jumping ahead here.
Yeah, I mean, they did do a whole reshuffle of the progress tracker, and it's strange that, sorry, it looks like we're getting a little bit of an internet problem here. I'm going to keep track of that and see if it gets any better. They did do a little bit of a reshuffle on the progress tracker, and it's a little bit weird that we didn't actually see it move forward to present us with the plans towards 1.0. It sounds like they just did up until the end of this year, and then they, again, after that, want to do another progress tracker update that shows us more of like what their long term is until 1.0. But all this time, all this year, we were waiting for this presentation on what's like they brought out the progress tracker. I think it was 2021 maybe, or 2020. They brought it out and it showed us progress or planned work up until I think 3 years after that. And we can all see, if you go on the progress tracker, you could see where everything just kind of cuts off at the end of last year. That was what they had planned up until. So they got to that point, and now we're at this level of, okay, well, now you need to show us what your plans are for the next few years. And it's not necessarily a roadmap in the sense that it tells us the dates that they're going to be done with stuff, but it gives us an idea of what features they want to work on. And so that's pretty important to communicate to us what they want to work on for 1.0. What stuff are we getting? What stuff are you holding off on that we might have to see after a commercial release? And now we still aren't really getting that. Why do you think that's taking so long? Do you think they can't figure it out themselves? Do you think, like they said, it's just system problems? Are they too scattered and all over the place because of Squadron 42 and stuff? Like, what's with the hang up on the whole progress tracker update?
The only thing I can see with the system excuse is because they have been doing a lot of website work. So they are updating things. I don't think the roadmap is necessarily seeing a lot of those updates because it doesn't feel like it's that different. but they are doing some website work. So I'll give them the benefit of the doubt for that particular thing. But I think ultimately, it's been more of, and I think this is also why we've probably seen some delays, not just with 324 and then 4.0 now. I think that Squadron may be taking a little bit more resources than what they intended for the polishing. I think that maybe, I mean, this is just guessing, but I think that maybe because they made it seem like, oh, all these teams are going to be shifting over, and they did say that, they'll be shipping over to the PU. But I think they've had to pull back, and I think they've kind of hinted about that too, that they've had to pull back some of that. And so I think, of course, we all know the PU suffers anything for Squadron. I mean, as it should be, because they got to finish up Squadron. So we're not, and I think also the way they've divided the teams up differently now, or they've combined them, I guess, because they're really combined now. They're not separate teams like they were, at least not for the roadmap. But I think them combining it too kind of allows them to hide what's going on with, hey, we're pulling from this team this week or this month or whatever, and so to go to Squadron. So I think that that's probably the reason why, and they've had this kind of influx, probably especially like the last 5, 6, maybe 5 months or so, really just trying to shuffle the teams about. Schedules are probably changing so much, and I think that they probably just didn't have enough to show on the roadmap, for that reason.
A little disappointing, because
Yeah.
what is the game? One of the biggest things that they need to start telling players is what this game is supposed to look like. Everybody is, now that they're starting to get a lot more of the details in with these features, like different star systems and reputation and factions and all that, even the cargo stuff, people are starting to get a lot more disappointed because they backed a game. They joined a game that they thought was going to be one thing, and because it's kind of hard to get the information or the exact understanding of what the details will be, once those features start coming in, they didn't see the Inside Star Citizen from 2 years ago that talks about it. They didn't see the Star Citizen Live from 4 years ago that tells more of the details. So they hear these things and they're like, wait a second. I've been trying to get ready for this game this whole time, and you're telling me that it's going to be like that? Some people are like, why is there PvP in this game? I didn't know there was going to be PvP. And it'd be really good to be able to have a solid message of like, here is the game. This is what it's going to be.
These are the intentions.
Yeah. Do you think they have a good grip of that themselves?
To a degree, I think they have like broad strokes. It's whenever they actually get in and start working on the systems themselves and are like, okay, they start hitting limitations or whatever, whether it's networking, whatever, they start hitting these limitations and they say, okay, I mean, I think the jump gate is probably a good example of this. I think they had all intentions of having the big gates around there, but then they started having limitations as to, what that was going to entail with scale or whatever. So they just kind of say, okay, we're not going to do this now. And then, of course, you let all these players down. They're doing that kind of with, they made salvage really good. And people started, throwing out their reclaimers. And they really started using reclaimers as almost like a daily driver. And then now, cargo is going to change that because it's a pain to try to get your cargo through that elevator. So now that they manually, they can manually or they can pay for it. But to do it themselves through that elevator, they're like, I don't like the reclaimer as much now. So there's things like that people just, they get used to one way and then it gets changed, and there's just no, I guess, overall arcing message that we can just point to. Even as content creators, we can't say, it can be hard to say, hey, you can look at this episode from 2021 and and they specifically said it here, and you can say that all day long, but people are still already angry about it.
Yeah. I try to do these like deep dives, looking at the old stuff that they say and getting all caught up on the features, but that only goes so far, and nobody wants to go through several hour-long videos to find out that kind of information. You want to be able to summarize that for everybody. So I feel like that's a big reason why they would want to have a Star Citizen 1.0 sort of message to send. And I don't know. You said that you felt like it was a little early to be talking about it, and it's something that they should be mentioning at CitizenCon. So you do feel like this is the year that they should be laying out an idea of the commercial release? I mean, I say that we're 12 years in, so it's weird to say something like that. But again, we can all see when we look at this game how much more work there still is to do on getting it to the
Even
level that
1.0.
they really, what they want to do. Do you think it's too early this year?
It it's going to depend. I mean, I think it's a good idea to say it's going to depend on their scope too. Like, are they going to be realistic in this, or is this going to be like, 4 or 5 years ago where they say, hey, we're going to have pyro in a year and then, something like that. But um, it's going to depend. If they come out and say, oh, we're going to have 5 systems and we plan on having this done, within 2 or 3 years, I'm going to be like, there's no way. There's no way you're going to have, So I'm curious as to what their scope is, what's going to be included. You're going to have base building and crafting. I'll keep talking about that. But what about all these other little things that haven't come in that we still have ships sitting around that can't do some functions for? You're going to have, how much more are we going to get for medical? What about and we know they're working on scanning right now, but how detailed and how full is that going to be? A tier 0 doesn't really tell you much until you get your hands on it. So seeing, and even bounty hunting, which is, we'll get into that later, I'm sure, but things like that still aren't in. What is going to be on this list? Is this going to be like a hype list, or is this going to be a realistic list? And I hope with Rich in there that it's going to be a realistic list.
I think they really do need to make sure that they're getting at least 5 systems by that launch. I mean, and maybe we see that speed up after Squadron 42 comes out and more people can be working on these systems. Maybe they've gotten the ability to build star systems into a better place. But yeah, 3 years from now, 2 years, maybe not 2 years, but I think 3 years from now, I would want to see at least 5-star systems ready to launch with this game. I'd want to see all of the main professions in a decent place. But I really just, when you think about the larger scale ships, specifically something like the Orion, which needs basically an entirely new form of mining to make real use of that ship to really set it apart.
Yep.
It's like, when does that happen?
And the way the teams work, you see that was it Torsten and them, they can only really handle one thing at a time. So last year they worked on salvaging. This year they've been working on engineering. Salvaging has gone by the wayside because there's still some things that need to go along, with salvaging, such as Maelstrom. And Maelstrom doesn't seem to have been touched hardly at all this year, according to the roadmap. So, you have to wonder, that team, to me, the ship team, of course, they get lots of people helping, but to me, that team over there that does those things, to me, they're like, they need more people to be able to pull off stuff like that, because mining has to be drastically changed, and what else are they going to be working on? So, and
then you look at something like refining, which they talked about refining ships a while back. It even showed up in the monthly report at one point. The Expanse is I think a very important ship for continuing an industrial game loop out in a place where it doesn't have space stations. And then there's refueling as well, something that we knew was going to be important for the pyro system that has now been kind of kicked down the line over and over, to the point where people might get into pyro and they might not even be able to ask other people for refueling help, because not only is there no refueling beacons, there's no reputation system to really show you how trustworthy another player is. You have to use the global chat to get fuel. Even in Stanton, that's insane. I would never go into the pyro system and ask in global chat if somebody can come help me to find my coordinates, come refuel me. That's crazy. So that's basically a useless feature.
Yeah, I mean, on top of that, refueling doesn't work all the time either. So that's another thing. It needs some love. Repair is another thing. I remember when we thought, I guess, Pyro was coming possibly a lot late last year. I had done a video on the ships that I thought Pyro they needed to work on for Pyro. None of those ships are being worked on, by the way. It's like the Crucible, things like that. So those things they're not even going to be in game. So it's like now they've said, okay, instead of making it seem like you were going to have to rely on other players, now they've just added small gas outposts, to places, because they, refueling isn't in like it needs to be.
Yeah. There's that. These are all the kinds of things that they need to lay out. And I know it might be a lot of work. It's unpredictable, especially with the Squadron 42 going on. But these are the kinds of things that I see them going to after server meshing and laying out a clear path. Take every single profession, every chunk of this game, and show us a clear path of the steps that need to be hit leading up to 1.0. What do you need to do for refueling? What do you need to do for refining, for engineering, for mining, for cargo hauling, for bounty hunting, all to get them to a state that's ready for people to play? Because at this point, you're
It ain't there.
yeah, they're asking people to depend on so little information with a game that has historically said, hey, we're communicating with you, and that is why you should feel comfortable continuing to fund the game, continuing to play an alpha that, yes, has stagnated, but we're working on. And I think I know people don't want to hear more talk. They want more action, less communication.
Mm-hmm.
But we need to have some sort of expectations that are set long term, even if those expectations, as we're talking about in this show, might not be as reliable as we'd want.
So what I'd like to see is them say they bring out, they have a whole 1.0 section in CitizenCon, and they say these are the I don't know 10 whatever their list is going to be. These are the things that we want in 1.0. This is what we expect to have. And then you can take, like you said, and break those down into ISCs in 2025. So Jared can get the team that's going to be working on, whatever, each feature, have them come in and explain it more fully there as a whole episode. You know what I mean? That right there, you're giving him some content for next year, and then you're also allowing it to be broken down into chunks as well, because, you give too much information at one time and people will forget about it, or, not pay attention. So I think that would probably be a good way to do it, just as long as they don't have this road to 1.0, theme going on, and that lasts for 5 years. But
Oh man, well, they've got to wrap some kind of marketing around it. That's honestly, it's been unfortunate because like people will be like, how long have we been on the road to 1.0? And I'm like, well, 4.0. And I'm like, well, do you mean when did they announce 4.0? When did they announce Pyro? Or when did they start using their actual official marketing that said road to Pyro kind of thing? Because those are all different dates. We didn't know about Pyro till like 2019. At least it wasn't confirmed, right? And then, but they announced 4.0 in 2016.
And then they started that road to in 2022, I think.
Yeah. Road to Pyro was like 2021 or 2020 or something like that. So it's like there's all kinds of different things, and it gets mixed up because of marketing, and they just need to be real straightforward. And we go back to it every time. We know they can't predict things. Don't put dates on it, right?
Yeah.
Just show us a Gantt chart, the progress tracker. That's what we wanted with the progress tracker.
Right.
So let's continue talking about that then. How much do you trust the progress tracker? I guess first let's talk about what it actually represents, because it's not necessarily a roadmap quite like Release View is.
Right. So the progress tracker, I know when I first started tracking it myself, I started looking at it, and I was one of those people that thought, oh, it's, because you can click on something like, you can click on like, I don't know, take the quasi-grazer space cal as an example. It'll say duration 25 weeks. So you'll, hit back on there because you'll see, oh, it's going to end of September. So you'll hit back on there and you'll say, hey, it actually has been in development now for, 23 weeks. That means it will be done. No, it will not be done. And those whole 23 or 25 weeks or whatever is an actual time spent on it. It's time that the teams were designated to be spent on it, but they did not necessarily spend the time on it. So the only way you can really tell is if you can keep track of the monthly report as well, and you can see when they did something on there. Because, supposedly if they touched it, it'll show up in the monthly report, which even that isn't always true. But anyway, so I mean, I take that back. What they did in the monthly report is true, but they don't always tell you. They don't tell you the things they didn't do, or the things they did do. Yeah, that like that. So, yeah, just because you see it on there. So I tell people now at the beginning of the roadmap videos is, look, I don't say the work is finished anymore. Now I say they're scheduled to stop working on it that way. Now ships are a little different because you can kind of tell ships, and even ships can get you, because you'll see that there's 6 unannounced ships. Their work is let's see, 5 of them are ending in November, which is just in time for IAE, and 1 is ending in January. Now people will think, oh, we're going to get 5 ships in IAE. Not true. What they'll do is they could just have somebody jump on there for a few months just to do concept. Concept ends in November, then they're going to announce the ship, but that ship may not show back on there to actually be start being made for year 2. Look at the Expanse. You just mentioned that one. It hasn't been back on since the initial time when they did the concept work. So it's just all about understanding what the roadmap is and what it isn't. And so that's what I try to tell people as I'm going through. I'm like, the work is scheduled to end here. Doesn't mean it's coming out. So if you can understand that, then,
Yeah. And that's why I say the progress tracker is like basically just telling us what they want to do without dates, because like you said, I mean, they don't even, the progress tracker doesn't even include when teams are on breaks. Somebody might take a vacation in the middle of that 25-week schedule, and it's not included on the progress tracker. We don't get any sort of word on it, whether or not that the amount of time, like it's almost not even worth putting the amount of time that they plan on working on there. They should just have a list of the features that they have planned to be worked on, and maybe the years that they want to have them worked on, because other than that, it's not a reliable resource, progress tracker.
It really isn't. I mean, me tracking things, I think it's more I'm able to see what they've stopped working on. Basically, is the bigger news usually, or what they've started. Sometimes they'll start something like when they threw the Apollo on there last year. That was a shock. Came out of nowhere. It was on there, and then again, it's off again. Something like that. They've also kind of made it worse with this new update too, because the teams are so combined now. So now you have this core gameplay pillar team, which includes like probably 10 different teams. I mean, so it's even harder to track. At least you could track before. You're like, oh, something's in sound effects now, so a ship's almost done or something, or a location that they're working on. If they're doing like polishing on visual effects or sound or whatever, it's almost done. But now they've changed it to where they're lumped into these teams. It's a lot harder to guess now.
Yeah. It's I don't really look at the progress tracker that much anymore, to be honest. And I think back in 2021 they contracted the release view and what that said, and even over the years, while they've attempted to keep the progress tracker updated, it really feels like that's also kind of fallen wayside. And that on its own gives a bit of a sense of just a hectic nature about the development of them starting and stopping different parts of the game's development and trying to just get certain things made. I think the underground facilities are a great example of that, how they went from underground facilities to now distribution centers to now there's not really much communication as to whether or not they're going to do the underground part of those. Like what's happened with those locations? Why are they the way they are? What's your future plan for them? We don't know, because things just kind of start and stop and do whatever they will. And that's not to sound the alarm for the development of the game, but it is to speak towards, I guess, taking these resources at face value of what they're saying.
Yeah. Caves is another one that was cave archetypes. Now they split it up into the different caves,
Right.
aesthetic caves versus sand caves, whatever.
So ultimately, do you think that people should even be paying attention to the progress tracker?
It I mean, it depends on the person, honestly. I think, I've seen people on Twitter, they're like they'll see things. I mean, even with the you can even look at like over the weekend with the sneak peek, we're seeing all this talk about the what is it, the MISC? It's not the Endeavor. Is it the Endeavor they're talking about?
Oh, the Odyssey?
The
Have I
Odyssey,
been seeing?
yes.
Yeah, I've been seeing. What happened with that? What is that from? What's
So
going on?
the sneak peek Friday in the email showed, clearly a MISC ship, but some people are speculating it could be a freelancer Mark II, or we do know they're doing a freelancer update. They did some work on it, so I don't know if they decided to go in and maybe make a different freelancer, or if that's even a freelancer. Some we speculated on info runners could be the whole B. But then, of course, you got people talking about the Odyssey because they really want the Odyssey. I get it. So that's been like pretty big. But when it comes to this, the same thing with the progress tracker. When it comes out, there are people that'll see something, they'll latch onto it as proof that we're gonna get this or that. And I always tell people also, the real proof is what they're showing in ISC. You're going to see things that they're going to show everything that they possibly can in ISC. So if you haven't seen it there at all, I mean, the odds of them just bringing out the Odyssey is just crazy. You know what I mean? Like, yes, it would be a perfect ship for Pyro. It'd be great, but,
Yeah, no way.
I
Do
don't
not
see
get
it.
yourselves hyped for the Odyssey, folks.
No.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
I mean, I mean, you've seen how many episodes and stuff we've got about the Polaris, you know. So if they're that happy for that, of course they're going to be happy with with the Odyssey to get it out there because they know people really want it. So I don't know.
Imagine they just randomly get I don't know if it's a capital ship or a large ship, but they just randomly get all this talk about how they need to go through and work on the RSI parts and designs so that they can mix and match their capital class pieces to make more RSI ships, and then they just here's a MISC capital ship though.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of them going down and saying, okay, because it makes sense, and you take that big RSI ship, you bring everything down, you can scale it down, you can get these other ships out there, you can get a big chunk knocked out. Sounded great, but then we started seeing things with the vehicle team, probably March, April, whatever they were on there, and they were like, well, we don't want our teams to get, too, I guess, bored with the same design. I was like, no, 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 no. What are you talking? It's like they were backtracking then about just working on RSI for a year. And I was like, oh, so now we're seeing MISC come up, and I'm like, oh, okay, what are they doing? So is the plan changed?
We'll have to see what they do there. But yeah, I haven't seen the sneak peek, so I don't know what it looks like. I would guess it's a new ship though. One of the ones that they see showing up. They see showing up in the monthly reports. And you make a good point there. There are a few different ways that you can see what's going on with Star Citizen. The roadmap is one. It's the most obvious. It's the easiest to see. But the roadmap only tells you so much. Really, inside Star Citizen, like you said, it's kind of the gauge for what's actually been worked on, what has been worked on enough for them to show us. And that's changed a lot over the years, because it used to be that you'd see sprint reports, you'd see inside Star Citizens about what was going on long term, like colonialism, fire. Those two things showed up in Inside Star Citizen for like 3 years, and they're only just now coming in with 4.0. But now they're doing the kind of, here's everything in the next update. So that's really, it lays it out pretty clearly. And then the monthly reports also tell you what people are working on. But even then, that's long-term stuff.
Yeah, and even then you gotta watch out, because I mean, what did they show last year? They showed bounty hunting on ISE even, and it got dropped after like October, November.
Yep. So we've been doing this a while. It's still a learning process for us, because so I think it's a learning process for CIG, the way that they go about it. So yeah, the progress tracker, I think, is a way to know what they want to work on. Anything time related or contextualized though, it's basically worth ignoring. And I think most people probably should never even look at it, because it's just going to get you hype up for no reason.
I mean, you look at there now, RSI, there's only the Polaris and the 2 Zeuses. That's it for RSI. There's no other progress showing for anything else,
All right. So that's the progress tracker. Let's one last thing before the progress tracker, and then we're going to move on to the actual roadmap and the roadmap updates we've seen over this last week, and talk about 4.0 a bit more. One last thing about the progress tracker though. What are some significant features that have been on the progress tracker for a while that you're now seeing get this big update from the progress tracker, but we're still not seeing actually come into the game? Just to speak towards everything we just explained about the tracker, what are some things that you feel like were talked about on the progress tracker and then just haven't shown up?
I mean, of course, bounty hunting tier 2 is one. There's various ammos that were worked on, and and I think we had a weapons. So they were talking about like the FPS weapons and stuff a few months back on ISC.
Yeah.
I think I think they hinted around about some different ammos that would be coming, because they have been working on. You have like incendiary and plasma ammo, things like that. So those are something that maybe they're waiting for more of the squadron stuff to get in before they work on it. Of course, you've got quantum simulation, which I think is just on hold until server meshing is up and running. Of course, refinery ships, that was another one. And the refinery ships thing too, I don't think they were working on a specific ship. I believe the messaging on that was that they were looking at how it would work on any, because there's a few ships. So I think they got through the planning stage of that, and that's why it has kind of died off. But they're probably again waiting until they work on like maybe the Galaxy, or the Galaxy is a refineries. It's or is it?
The Expanse.
It is a refinery. Expanse, or even like the one that came out last year.
The Galaxy had refinery stuff with it. Yeah.
Or the new Arastra. That's the other one that'll do it.
Right.
So I think they were just in the planning stages for those. Of course, the Apollo dropped off again. Space Mines is another one, which I know the ship for that, but I was still wondering if maybe they could actually still put them out without the ship, possibly. I don't know. But anyway, things like that. Oh, swimming tier 0. That was another thing that,
Right. We still can't swim.
Well, yeah, we still don't have like the what do they call that? The boxes that have the the water, uh, physics or whatever yet. So, I guess they don't need swimming just yet. But yeah, things like that. There's little things. It's mainly a lot of little things. Oh, persistent HABs. That's another one that kind of dropped off too. And I think base building just took that over, so.
Yeah. And obviously we could see from the hangars that they're having a little bit of trouble with persistent areas. So I guess once we see persistent hangars come in and be stable, maybe they'll start to work on that again. But that's not something that popped up on the new progress tracker.
None of those things did. No, they were all just cut off last year.
Are there a lot more, or is that generally what you've seen? Like everything else from the progress tracker, have we seen to see in the game in some way?
In the game, I mean, for the most part, I mean, yeah, I mean, you have it's a lot. It was a lot of little things. The big things we knew were coming, such as engineering. It's things like that. The caves, that was something that is still coming, that's still being worked on, not in game yet, but still coming. There's different clothings. FPS scanning is like still supposedly coming. They're still trying to get that over here from Squadron. We did get the fire extinguisher finally. That was, the fire system's coming. So those things like that. Yeah, I think for the most part, but that's things they're working on that they've told us about,
Yeah. And that again speaks to how significant 4.0 is, not just for server meshing, but the features that are coming in. Engineering is big, colonialism outposts, fire damage system. Those 3 are all things that we've been hearing about since like 2020. And then jump points obviously is a big one. And I'd say abandoned space stations it's not one they've talked about a lot, but it showed up on the roadmap in like 2019 and then got removed. So all of those feel like very long-term things that is good to see come into the game. And if they do come in, it definitely makes 2024 feel like a more significant year.
Yeah, Asteroid Bases is another one that they're actually bringing out that was on the roadmap for a while too. And it's finally about to hit. So
yeah. So they're getting work done. It's just so sporadic. And it's hard to be able to predict.
And it's not lined up with their hype either. That's the other thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's about the expectations once again. And we'll talk about the preview channel because I think that falls in that category as well. One that we actually haven't seen, we didn't even see added to the new Progress Tracker edition, Planet Tech V5. And we know for a fact they've been working on that. Like that's going to be at CitizenCon. Yeah. And they haven't said anything about it, hasn't shown up in the monthly reports, not in the Progress Tracker. So it kind of takes a crap all over everything we're saying here. Why do you think that's not on the Progress Tracker?
Yeah, I don't know about that one. Like, I don't know why. There's certain things like that you'd figure. I mean, we know is being worked on. I mean, isn't that River Guy? Isn't he work on that? Will, I forget.
Yeah, I would assume.
Yeah. He does great work and also a great presenter at CitizenCon as well. But I'm sure he's working on that and he's promised some really great things coming with Planet Tech, and I believe it. I mean, they have to, and so it is interesting that's not on there at all. Like I don't know how that fell through or why it's not on there. It's kind of confusing, but yeah.
Well, let's move on to the actual roadmap. So in this, we've got 4.0 and the things that they have planned for the rest of the year. At the next update, we'll talk about when that might be coming. The recent delay that has pushed 4.0 from Q3 to Q4, and generally what that all entails. So let's start by talking about the delay. 4.0 was initially it was God. Initially, it was touted to be coming in 2018. Oh my God. They wanted it to be, it's really funny, folks, if you haven't seen the roadmap from 2016. They wanted to release 3.0 in January of 2017, and then release a new number every quarter, culminating with 3.4, and then 4.0 the following year. So that's 4.0 in 2018. That didn't happen. Then it was 4.0 in 2020. That didn't happen. Then I think it might have been 2021 or 22. Didn't happen. 23 didn't happen. 24, they wanted to have it out by summer, right?
Almost about not to happen.
Yeah. So they wanted to get it out by the summer, which can mean anywhere from July to August, or sorry, June to August, really, is what I think most people would expect. Q3 ends in October. So I think by July time, most people who were paying attention were probably thinking, okay, this is looking like either September, October kind of thing. Like it's not, they're not going to have enough time to do the testing on this.
Definitely not summer.
Yeah. So now that we've seen and I don't want to forget, I think it was maybe last month that Jared said, we're still planning on releasing this. You're right. I did not say by the end of the year. I said within the next few months. So that then implied August, September, October kind of time release. With that window being set as expectations in July, were you surprised that the roadmap now reflects it coming in Q4 of this year?
I wasn't surprised by the delay because I mean it was clear even the last time we spoke that we thought at we thought they would either have it in PTU by CitizenCon or it would be out. That was our guess because they were like we were both saying they really should have this out by then. For it to get pushed back is not surprising, especially as August started hitting and we just see that they just could not get 324 nailed down. So as August started, I was like, yeah, we're not going to see this before CitizenCon, of course. I was hoping we'd at least see PTU, and that could still. I don't think that's going to happen either by CitizenCon, but because I mean we're 2 months out now. But let's see what this next week brings with 324 if it gets in there, and then if they can jump in, we'll see how soon they get it into Evocati. That's the thing because right after Invictus, they didn't get 324 pushed right in, or at that time it was like 323.x whatever. But they didn't get it pushed right into Evocati. It still took like a month or so, maybe 6 weeks to get it in there. So it's to me, you're going to be able to tell. I think once it gets to Evocati, is it going to be right after 324 or what? And so yeah, I still think they have plenty of time to get it in by the end of the year. I just hope it's not like we're going to go live the week before Christmas because people are going to be gone.
Oh,
Things
God.
are going to go bad. That's the one thing I hope they don't try to do. But they seem to have taken a different approach since 318, and that it needs to be done. It needs to be working pretty much better or okay before they release it live. So I give them credit for that at least.
Do you think that, well, I guess if they get it into the PTU when 324 goes live, if they get into Evocati, that would really go far to give the impression that 324 being in PTU was stopping them from getting 4.0 out to testing. If they do take a while to get 4.0 out to testing in Evocati, then that kind of speaks against the idea that 324 being in PTU so long delayed 4.0 getting into testing. And I think that would be very key for a lot of people to understand is we all know that 4.0 isn't necessarily going to be delayed feature-wise by 324, but did 324 delay it because of its presence in the PTU?
I think if anything, some of that tech for the persistence might be an issue for 4.0 with server meshing or something. It could have been some of the same people working on that. That could be how it delays 4.0. If they needed these last 3 months to be able to really crunch some stuff for server meshing, last minute things they really needed to get done, and those things were kind of pushed back because of what they were having to do for the persistence, for the habs or the hangers, then I think that could be the reason that we don't. And again, it's gonna depend on what we get in Evocati. Like if it's right off the bat, they got both systems up, you can jump between the two, it's good. And then they're just kind of fine tuning it, other things like maybe like the mission system, for example, has to be changed, and that's one of the main features that's coming with 4.0. And so those missions, I guess they need to be able to work between the systems, and they're not currently. So is that working? Things like that. Those may be the things that hang up 4.0 from coming out, in November versus pushed off into 2025.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. Not going to lie, I would love to see it go to Evocati right after, but that's high hopes.
Yeah.
Now, Q4 can mean a lot of things. It can mean beginning of October. It can mean CitizenCon release, and it can mean all the way at the end of December. If they did get it out in October, do you think a lot of the anger that we're seeing surrounding this delay to Q4 would dissipate? Do you think people would be like, oh, okay, it's Q4, but it's the beginning of Q4. It's kind of similar to what I expected at the beginning of August when it still said Q3.
If it's PTU at CitizenCon, maybe not even full release, but just PTU or open for everyone, if they could say, hey, it's open for everyone, go try it, let us get these bugs worked out so we can get it out to you within the next month, I'd say people would be okay with that, especially riding on all the other news that they're going to have there. But I think that would go a long way to helping this year turn around. If 4.0 hits this year, it's going to turn the year around.
It's going to go from being the worst year to the best year.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't think it's the worst year, but I mean, content-wise, it's a drought, because it really is.
Yeah, waiting for 4.0. It does ring a little bit similar to waiting for 3.0. Not quite as bad. The wait for 3.0 was awful. We didn't even have an update for a whole year, but this wait, it definitely is starting to feel similar in some ways. I would love to see the preview channel utilized, and that I think is part of what's also a little weird about this year, in that even if they couldn't get 4.0 or server meshing or Pyro into Evocati because 3.24 was taking up that PTU slot, they haven't really used the preview channel near as much as they kind of insinuated that they would be at the end of last year. What do you think the story is around that?
I honestly don't know. I wonder, if I had to guess, I'd say they used the preview channel a little bit for Arena Commander with the engineering, maybe, or was that just part
No,
of?
that's live.
Okay, that was okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. To me, it feels like maybe they threw it out there as something they thought they would be utilizing more, but they've just been so confined to working on these specific things. It feels like the team is full. Like they have plenty on their plate right now. That's what it feels like. It's felt like that pretty much for a lot of this year. 323 kept them really busy, and then I'm assuming, like I said earlier, that people are being pulled off, to Squadron more than what they maybe thought. And then that's probably why we're not seeing as fast of a pace overall. And maybe that's also why they just don't have enough to put into the preview channel. I mean, yeah, they could have put some stuff in Pyro, but then maybe it hit such a certain peak of the year. They're like, well, let's just save what's coming in Pyro for Citizen. Hopefully don't have CitizenCon and Pyro, because that'll be 6-7 years in a row.
God.
But let's just save it for 4.0 at this point. Let's just give people something new. Maybe that's why they're not doing another Pyro preview, because they did say they were going to do at least Pyro previews, and they haven't even done that.
I mean, they said we'd see the quantum travel system. They said we'd see hacking. All these things would be in the preview channel, and we just haven't seen that at all this year. We haven't even heard about those things.
Right. So it feels like they just don't have anything to preview,
Right.
Maybe it's just that simple,
And that's is that because those people had, like you said earlier, just more going on with Squadron 42 than expected? Has hacking and the quantum travel rework not even moved forward this year?
Yeah, that's what it feels like. And the quantum travel experience is actually scheduled to go through the end into 2025.
Mm-hmm.
Now Jake did say the other day, I think it was Jake, he said, just because you see something ending in December doesn't mean that it's still being worked on that late. It could be released before then, but if it's not released, it's just scheduled that far. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. So I get that. So just because we see all these certain things like the Pyro system setup and all that scheduled out through the end of the year doesn't necessarily mean they won't be finished until then. So I don't know. But I do feel like they've just been so focused on what they have to do that they're just not even putting the time to throw in stuff in the preview channel, or it's just not enough to really get out there and show. Yeah.
We've seen that quite a few times actually with the progress tracker, where they've released something that still says it has months of work left to be done on it, and you can kind of then see small updates come to those things in the following patches. So I can confirm that. I mean, obviously, if somebody from CIG is saying it, then I don't need to confirm it. But we have indeed seen things that released while they still had scheduled work on the progress tracker. So that doesn't ever worry me. I don't really pay much attention to that. And again, it's why you shouldn't really take the progress tracker as the gospel of when things are going to release, because they can come before or after they say they're done.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? I forgot. But the PU, the PTU, and the preview channel all exist now in parallel, and they talk about all of them, but it feels like they could make better use of them. Do you think that they should be slowing down the development of the persistent universe, making sure it's a little bit more stable, and using the PTU and the preview channel to be more about, here's what you can do to play what's coming later? Or would that be stretching themselves too thin? As you said, it feels like they are.
I think, I mean, as far as their scheduling goes, I think they're stretched as it is. But I think, as far as the stability, I think we need to see what server meshing is going to do for stability before they try, because I think any work you do on that before server meshing, I mean, at this point, it's just, there's no use in doing it until server meshing comes in. And then I guess we get to the more dynamic server meshing, which I think is really what's going to, that'll be the next thing we talk about after this whole release of 4.0. Because I mean, I don't even know how long you guys have been talking about server meshing at this point, or what it was called before. I mean, I know it had another name, but I know everyone's they're tired of talking about server meshing, because that's the excuse. Everybody's like, wait for server meshing, wait for server meshing. And I think I think that's it though. I mean, there's so many things. Bounty hunting is, they can't really move forward with the things for bounty. Yes, you're like, oh, you can, we can get a mission to go get it, but they can't track the NPCs and things until they get those systems in. Like, there's an NPC scheduler service thing for the progress tracker. Hasn't been worked on, by the way. All that kind of died off. The stuff for Tony Z, all that stuff died off last year, and I think it's because they're waiting for server meshing. So those are all things that are all being hinged on that, and it's also going to be interesting to see as they add those things, what's performance going to be like then too. So I think performance is just something that right now is hinging on server meshing, and then in the future, dynamic server meshing.
Would you say that, do you believe that server meshing really is the bottleneck that's stopping the game from, like, do you think after server meshing comes in, even static, we will start to see things much more quickly come into the game?
Again, that's going to depend on the squadron release, I think. I think we're all hoping for a squadron release, at least those that are more fans of the PU versus that, just so we can see what however many employees there are now can actually focus on something like that. And they will go on and do, what is it, chapter 2 or whatever of Squadron after. But still, it would be nice, even if you just had like a nice year of just, maybe 2 years of just them focusing on the PU, like what that would really bring. Because I think the things that they wanted this year probably would have been better off had they had that, had they had the focus there. Not necessarily saying we'd be in 4.0 at this point, but I think we would have been closer. So it'll be interesting to see if that is. But the server meshing, I do really think that a lot of things are just hinging on that. Like I really do. I'm not saying overnight it's gonna make performance better, but I mean you can just see how it's going to change things. Like if watching your videos, you can just you get the idea of what it's supposed to do. Even seeing the demo last year at CitizenCon, it was just amazing. And so you can, anyone who's ever played the game and has had issues where everybody's in like one area, whenever they bring that in and it's going to change things, it's going to make everything run better, whether it's your elevators, your trains, whatever. And I mean, they're even having to go back and change the systems for the elevators and trains and the missions, which I think was added work they probably weren't maybe counting on. So those are things that are going to make it better, I think.
I actually remember them talking about that maybe 3 or 4 years ago in the monthly reports. Okay. They talked about how they were redoing the transit systems for server meshing. And I'm guessing the work they're doing on that now is indicative of the fact that whenever persistent entity streaming came in and the tech actually advanced, they realized this is the real work we have to do to get this to work. Mm-hmm. And I imagine there's a lot of those moments with this game's development where, and we could see it sometimes on our own end, they do something or they plan to do something and then back-end system comes in and they realize the actual details of what they need to do, so they're kind of redoing it over again, getting rid of that tech debt. And
or you can't even start it until it's there. I think that's a big hang up for them on a lot of things.
Yeah. And a lot of what they've talked about from the beacon systems to the reputation to, like you said, the quantum or star simulation, all that stuff might be held up by server meshing. That's what we hope. Because if that's the case, then maybe we will see a good expansion in the development after 4.0 and into that 4.x branch. And that's really that's kind of what I'm waiting for, to sort of turn the fire on in the videos and be a little bit more, I don't want to say accusatory, but a little more holding a fire to the development, because we've all understood what this bottleneck might have been for a long time. And once server meshing is here, if things don't actually change, I think then that is the time when the community really should start to be like, okay, we've got some serious things to talk about here. Because this was, going back to 2018, this is what you were saying was the road to release. And if things aren't able to improve after this, then where are we going from here?
Yep.
So 4.0 may come this year. What do you think? Do you think that the delay into Q4 really means that we'll see it mid next year? Are we past those add 6 months on to whatever CIG says moments, or is this still the time when people should be setting their expectations even further out?
If it misses the end of this year, I think it's just barely going to miss. I mean, we're seeing so much in ISC for the things that they're doing. Granted, we're not seeing. I mean, we did see the I guess the travel, the jump points. We've seen some of that, and they've even improved. They said, even Jared said that even from what they showed, last month or earlier this month, they've already improved on it since then. So it already looks different. So I think they're just fine tuning those things. Like I said, the only thing that I can see holding it back are just the systems themselves. And once they get a full load on there with players, probably wave one is probably really going to test it. Evocati doesn't necessarily put the full load on, but I think getting people full load, testing it, and seeing how it goes. And I'm more curious about the missions part of it. Like, to me, because it's a whole refactor, and I'm more curious to see how that's going to work, because they really need those missions to carry across. They really need the missions to work. And so, I mean, Elliot and them could come on there and they can say they've done all these amazing things, but until they actually work right, the missions are working well. And I'm hoping that the mission systems refactor is going to help in that too, because we have so many mission problems.
Gosh,
they put in so much work for really good ideas, and then they just fall flat because of some, a box not going into a container, or whatever, things falling through the ground, stuff like that. So I'm really hoping that overall those things are going to be smooth sailing.
That's a lot of this game.
And if so, I think we'll see it by the end of this year.
A lot of this game has so much to offer that just gets completely stomped on by stability problems and bugs and glitches, and it'd be great to be able to just, and I know this is what a lot of people say, just make what we have already stable. Can't do that because we got a lot of stuff that we still need in the game to make it a functional game, but
right.
I understand where they're coming from. There's a lot on offer in this game already. It's just that you can't experience half of it. I mean, mission givers aren't even worth going to right now, and a lot of people don't even know they exist.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that ultimately they're just going to keep throwing everything in, and then we're going to have that. They're probably going to see a year of polish, but I'm sure if Squadron takes, 2 years or a year and a half to polish, I can only imagine what the PU is going to take to polish to get everything,
Yeah.
So
yeah, 1.0 might really just feel like a beta period, to be honest.
Yeah, it might. And to me, that would have been, I kept thinking that's what they were going to do, was go into a beta first. That's kind of what I thought we were going to see before a 1.0.
I think they feel too much heat.
They probably do. I mean, 12 years is 12 years.
Yeah, I think they feel the need to market an actual commercial release, and then it'll probably feel like an early access game at that point, which is not what we want, but it's probably what they're going to do.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Do you, dang it, what was I going to ask? One last thing about 4.0. While it comes back to me, let me ask another question about 4.0. Okay. Do you think there's anything that they haven't put on the roadmap for 4.0 that we still might see in that update?
No, I don't think they're adding anything that we haven't seen. I mean, hopefully everything that's in there changes to committed because it's still not. But I think they have enough on their plate right now, unless it's a ship, because I mean the other Zeus, the CL, did get added for 4.0 now. So that's something that was kind of added, I guess. Maybe there'll be another ship that gets added, because I don't know. Like um I think they've had kind of a dearth of ships this year. So
Yeah.
you know, I think between now and the end of the year, we're probably going to see what 4 or 5 new ships coming. So,
I've got my finger crossed for the quantum travel rework. I really hope we do get that
oh
with 4.0.
yeah, yeah, because they teased it already.
Yeah, we've seen quite a
Yeah,
bit of it, and it would
yeah,
do a lot to help the improvements they brought with the quantum or the new star map too.
yeah, and we will be traveling a lot more now too. So,
Yeah.
it'd be, I will say one thing I would like to see. Maybe since they're working on it, it could possibly slip in. But those smaller jump points. That would be,
Oh,
that would be amazing if
that'd
they
be an
threw those
interesting
in.
addition. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. My last question, I remember it now. Why do you think they've been so quiet about server meshing? I know they gave us an update on how it's been going throughout the year and their
Mhm.
successful tests, and they had the ISC, but they didn't really talk too much about immediate plans or what they wanted to do with testing or how things are going in respect to 4.0 actually coming out. Feels like they've been a little bit quiet about server meshing itself, especially in the season of 4.0 ISC. Do you think that's something that people should be worried about?
I mean, it's crossed my mind. Even whenever they were on their last and they were explaining how well the test went. Again, they didn't mention how things were going now. Even then, they could have said something. Even today, we're steadily surprised by the test that we're running, but they haven't. So, I mean, I think ultimately maybe they're saving something for CitizenCon. But if they're not saving something, maybe it's just going to come out in its purest form. Going from Stanton going to here, maybe they're not going to try to break up any of the systems just yet because maybe that's not going quite well yet, or maybe they're waiting for some of these other backend systems to get in there before they actually commit to what part of server or how much server meshing we're going to get with 4.0. So it could be they're going to tell us in CitizenCon, or we're just going to get the bare minimum. So I hope it's not the bare minimum, but
Yeah, so do I. I hope that they can at least split each system into 2 or 3 servers so we can see some
yeah,
significant increase in stability or at least player cap.
yep,
But we'll see.
we shall.
All right, CasaBlack, thank you so much for joining me for this show. I think that's a good place for us to stop off. Before you go, could you let everybody know where they might find your own content?
You can find me on YouTube. That's the main area where I create content. That would be CasaBlack, CasaBlack Gaming. And then you can also check me on Twitter, where you can actually engage with me. I'm pretty much on there every day. So if you want to talk about Odysseys or server meshing or whatever, I'm there.
Gosh, the Odyssey thing. Let that one rest, folks. That's not coming anytime soon. Oh,
Odyssey
man.
4.0.
Oh, boy, that'd be funny. All right, man. Thank you again for joining me. Thanks, everybody, for watching. If you are a supporter, Patreon, YouTube, Twitch, you can always come and join us live for these. We've got chat up, so we tend to kick back and forth with them a little bit before the show and do a little bit of gossiping. But if not, we post these every week on Mondays. You can get them on your favorite audio platform or on YouTube if you don't mind the ads. And make sure to catch the latest videos and streams as well, going up on YouTube. Thanks again for joining, and I'll see you all next week.